What would you do if you found yourself in a forest where the shadows seemed alive, where every step deeper felt like stepping closer to something ancient and malevolent? In 1999, the world was introduced to the Blair Witch Project, a film that blurred the line between fiction and reality. It told the story of three filmmakers who vanished in the Black Hills forest while investigating the legend of the Blair Witch. But here's the chilling part. The film wasn't just a story. The events depicted were inspired by real accounts, real disappearances, and real horrors tied to the legend of the Blair Witch. Tonight, we'll delve into the unsettling tales that inspired the film. From centuries-old curses to modern-day vanishings, these are the true creepy stories that make the Blair Witch more than just a movie. Stay with me until the end, but remember, truth is often scarier than fiction. The story begins in 1785, in the small settlement of Blair, nestled within what we now know as the Black Hills Forest of Maryland. It was here that Ellie Kedward, an outsider and a healer, was accused of witchcraft after several children claimed she had drawn their blood. The townspeople wasted no time. In the dead of winter, they dragged Ellie into the woods, tied her to a tree, and left her to die. But the forest didn't forget. By the following spring, strange occurrences plagued the settlement. Children vanished, crops withered, and livestock died under unexplainable circumstances. Those who had condemned Ellie fell ill, haunted by terrifying visions until their untimely deaths. The settlement was abandoned soon after. The few survivors spoke of a curse that would never lift, a malevolent force tied to the forest itself. And though Blair was no more, the stories lived on. Centuries later, this tale of vengeance and darkness would become the backbone of the Blair Witch Project. But as you'll see, it wasn't the only story that inspired the film. The filmmakers behind the Blair Witch Project didn't invent the legend from thin air. Instead, they pulled from chilling real-life accounts tied to the Black Hills Forest, blending fact with fiction so seamlessly that it's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. One such story is the tragedy of Eileen Treacle in 1825. Eileen was only 10 years old, a playful, carefree child who loved to explore the streams near her home. On a warm summer day, she was playing near Tappy East Creek when tragedy struck, or so the witnesses thought. Several townspeople claimed to have seen Eileen slip and fall into the creek, but their descriptions of what happened next defy belief. They swore they saw a pale, ghostly hand emerge from the water and pull Eileen under. Her body was never recovered. For 13 days after her disappearance, the creek ran black with an oily, viscous substance. The water poisoned the livestock that drank from it, and several villagers fell ill. This story isn't just an eerie anecdote, it became one of the core inspirations for the ominous presence in the Blair Witch Project. The filmmakers borrowed this tale to reinforce the idea that the forest wasn't just haunted, it was alive, malevolent, and deeply connected to water as a symbol of life and death. Another story that inspired the film is the disappearance of Robin Weaver in 1886. Robin was only 8 years old when she vanished into the woods one evening. Her grandmother, frantic with worry, described her as a curious child who had always been drawn to the forest. Search parties combed the area for days with no luck. When Robin finally returned, her face was pale, her clothes torn, and her eyes wide with terror. She claimed a woman had found her in the woods and led her to a strange house. Inside, Robin said, the walls were covered in symbols, twisted arcane markings that seemed to pulsate in the dim light. The woman told Robin to stay inside and not to leave, no matter what she heard. Terrified, Robin eventually escaped and ran home. But the story doesn't end there. The search party that went out to find her wasn't so fortunate. Weeks later, their bodies were discovered in a grotesque arrangement. They were lying in a perfect circle, their hands bound, their eyes gouged out. This story heavily influenced the imagery in the Blair Witch Project. The strange stick figures, the piles of stones, the feeling of being lured deeper into the forest by something unseen. It all mirrored Robin Weaver's account. But here's where it gets even creepier. The filmmakers added a chilling detail to their movie. A ritual involving victims standing in the corner of a room, a reference to the real-life accounts of how the Blair Witch was said to disorient and immobilize her prey. The stories of Eileen Treacle and Robin Weaver are more than just eerie folklore. They're the foundation of a legend so deeply tied to the Black Hills Forest that even the film couldn't fully capture its terror. Fast forward to 1994, when three student filmmakers, Heather Donahue, Michael Williams, and Joshua Leonard, entered the Black Hills Forest to investigate these very legends. What they didn't realize was how closely their own journey would mirror the tales they were documenting. At first, their trip seemed uneventful. They interviewed locals who spoke of the Blair Witch with a mix of fear and fascination. One man described finding strange symbols carved into trees. Another recalled hearing whispers at night, even though he was completely alone. As the filmmakers ventured deeper into the woods, they began encountering these symbols firsthand. They discovered piles of stones neatly arranged in front of their tent. Stick figures, eerily similar to the ones described in Robin Weaver's story, hung from the trees. At first they dismissed these as pranks, perhaps by locals trying to scare them. But as the days wore on, the mood shifted. At night, they heard noises, the crunch of footsteps circling their camp, faint laughter that seemed to echo through the trees, and whispers so quiet they could barely make out the words. The forest seemed to turn against them. Their maps became useless, their sense of direction vanished, and the landmarks they thought they recognized seemed to shift and disappear. Then, Josh disappeared. The remaining two, Heather and Mike, were left in a state of growing panic. Their desperation mirrored the stories of those who had come before them, people who ventured into the Black Hills Forest and never came back. Heather and Mike eventually stumbled upon a trail of symbols that led them to an abandoned house deep in the woods. This house, with its rotting walls and bloodied handprints, was eerily similar to the one Robin Weaver had described over a century earlier. Inside, they found symbols etched into the walls, piles of stones arranged in strange patterns, and an overwhelming sense of dread. In the basement, Heather's camera captured Mike standing in the corner, motionless, as if under some kind of spell. This detail, a victim immobilized and disoriented, was inspired by the real-life accounts of how the Blair Witch was said to manipulate her prey. Heather's screams echoed through the house before the footage abruptly ended. Their bodies were never found, only their tapes remained, a haunting reminder of the horrors that awaited anyone who dared to seek the Blair Witch. To this day, their fate remains one of the most chilling mysteries tied to the Black Hills Forest. Was it simply the product of human paranoia, or did they truly fall victim to the malevolent force that had haunted the area for centuries? The parallels between their journey and the stories they investigated are undeniable, and perhaps that's the most terrifying part of all. Even after the release of the Blair Witch Project, the stories haven't stopped. Hikers and explorers who venture into the Black Hills Forest report strange lights, unexplainable noises, and an overwhelming sense of dread. One man described finding a clearing filled with hundreds of stick figures eerily similar to those depicted in the film. As he turned to leave, he heard a voice whisper his name. Another survivor claimed to see a woman standing in the distance, her back turned. When he called out, she turned her head, but her body remained still. Her eyes were hollow. These accounts reinforce what the Blair Witch Project captured so well: the fear that the forest itself is alive, a dark force waiting to consume anyone who dares to trespass. The Blair Witch legend isn't just a story. It's a patchwork of real events, unsettling parallels, and unexplainable phenomena. It's a reminder that some places are better left undisturbed. So, would you dare to step into the Black Hills Forest knowing what lurks within? Or will you heed the warnings and stay far away? Let us know in the comments. What do you believe? Is the Blair Witch just a legend? Or is there truth hiding in the shadows? And before you go, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more chilling tales that will keep you up at night. Turn on notifications because the darkness is always closer than you think.